are delighted that you could all join us today. I'm very pleased to be addressing one of my favourite topics around biotechnology, which is where the money comes from, and one which always brings plenty of people around to discussions. We have with us three excellent presenters today who are going to talk about the different instruments available for biotech SMEs. So, Kai, if I could just have my next slide, please. Thank you. My name is Claire Scantleberry, and I have a long-standing interest in biotechnology development, both for individual companies, but also for the sector and the ecosystem as a whole. And as you will know, funding for biotechnology commercial development has a lot of significant challenges, as it's a very expensive game to play, and the technologies for which you seek investment are often extremely high risk. So you have to do a lot of hard work to persuade people to fund your company, to start up and to grow. And what, of course, you see often in Europe is that private investment is very cautious, going in at later stages in company development, but also at quite low sums compared to other areas such as the US. And as you get to the licensing and deal-making end of company development, you need to be much more mature than many people can afford to reach within their biotechnology companies. The European Union has provided a lot of different structures and opportunities for companies to help develop and grow, and primarily initially through their collaborative funding pathways. And hopefully everybody here is familiar with the collaborative research funding through the different framework programs. But often, going into a large-scale collaborative project doesn't provide a huge amount of money for an individual company, and also you have to work much more broadly than you might consider useful, so which is somewhat slowing things down for biotechnology companies. But in response to that, the European Commission has developed a number of mechanisms which are now available to help fund companies directly, both within a grant mechanism and within also loan mechanisms. And that's really what we're here to look at today. So I'm really delighted to welcome Sandra from the EAF, Armando from DG Growth, and Luis from DG RTD. So I'm going to stop talking in a minute. I'll just run through a few of the housekeeping options for you. So your microphones are all on mute, so I think there's nothing you can do about that, so that's good. We would really encourage you to submit questions through the chat function today. Please, I would encourage you to submit them during all of the presentations, and after each sort of 15 to 20-minute presentations, we'll take one or two questions directly applicable to that presentation, and we also have a dedicated 30-minute discussion slot at the end. So please share your chat messages as much as you like, and we'll pick out really good examples and ask them to each of our speakers and to all of them at the end. We will be recording this webinar, and both the recording and the slides will be available to all registered delegates at the end. So I think that's all the housekeeping I need to do. So I will then ask Kai to go into my next slide, and I'm very happy to introduce Sandra. So you can introduce yourself now, Sandra.
Yeah, thank you very much, Claire. Hello, everyone. I'm very happy to be here today with you. I'd like to thank EuropaBio for inviting me, and especially Claire and Kai for organizing this event. I'm Sandra Ferry, and I'm heading the life science investment activities of the European Investment Fund. So I guess I can deep dive into the presentation. So starting with the next slide, I will just give a few words about who we are. So what is EIF, for those who are not familiar with our organization. So the EIF is a European Union body whose mission is to enhance access to financing for small and medium-sized European companies across Europe, so basically across all Europe. We do not invest or lend directly to companies. We are not a bank, and we proceed for all our equity investment activities by supporting mainly venture capital and private equity funds. And our annual investment activities, annual commitment into funds, so both private equity and venture capital funds, is of approximately 3 billion euros, of which half of which is invested into VC funds. We've been investing in the life science industry for more than 25 years now, so helping establish, but also let's say, emerging and first-time managers. And we have committed in total 3 billion euros into those life science venture capital funds. And in total, we have a portfolio of 130 of these funds. Approximately, we commit 350 million euros into life science VC funds, and this represents approximately 25% of our investment activities in the VC space. We move on to the next slide. This slide is to explain why it is important to support, and we review it as a strategic issue to continue investing in life sciences. First of all, we know that there are a lot of needs which are related to the growing and also the aging population and all the related health issues that derive from that. And there are a lot of uncured diseases to date. So 6,000 diseases do not have any treatments to date. And there is an urgent need to find new treatments, but also better prevention of those diseases going forward. And we've seen it. We brutally saw how a virus such as the COVID-19 could disrupt our whole lives and our whole economies, and put under a lot of pressure our healthcare systems, which have been completely overwhelmed. And we know that COVID-19 is probably not just a one-off. We know that the World Health Organization has put several other viruses under the watch list, and there are also other similar threats hanging over our heads, like also the superbugs, which are getting those bacteria, which are getting more and more resistant to any antibiotics that treatment that we have. So I think we could all agree that we wish more investments would have been made in the past, so that we would have been better prepared also to tackle this, to face this crisis that we are now going through. We can move to the next slide here. Basically, to highlight what are the strengths of the European life science industry, and there are numerous ones. The first one is that there is a huge innovation potential across the EU. We have 16 of the top life sciences universities in Europe. We are on par with the US in terms of scientific publications in the most renowned scientific journals. There are many examples of life sciences champions that are originating from Europe in all the industry subsectors, and just very recently, the very good example would be the German Biotech company, which together with Pfizer has developed one of the most promising lead to have a COVID vaccine. So on this, in terms of scientific strengths, we are very high. Let's say we are very well placed at the global level. There is also the second point. The quality of the venture capital teams investing in the life science space is excellent. We have a number of very experienced and established fund managers in Europe that have a very long-standing experience. They have lived through different market cycles, so they have a huge network also of serial entrepreneurs that they can mobilize to help startup companies, and this is a real strength of the ecosystem. The second part of it is also that we have very good emerging teams across Europe that have all the ingredients to let's say have to add a lot of value also to biotech companies in Europe and companies also investing in addressing medtech and digital health. And this growing pool of serial entrepreneurs is also a good sign that the market is getting more and more sophisticated. And finally, we have a lot of structural advantages also compared to the US. So first of all, the entry valuation are much lower, so approximately 30% lower. And also the companies are very capital efficient. So because of the lack of let's say, capital in this industry across Europe, the companies have learned to do more with less money, and they are extremely lean. And this results in a very attractive multiple on cost multiple on cost of unicorn exits, as we can see here, 7.8 times for European companies versus 2.7 times for the USA. And a lot of foreign investors have picked up on this, and they are tapping now into late-stage European opportunities. The life science VC asset class is providing a unique combination of superior returns and societal impact. It is one of the best performing asset class that we have in our portfolio, with a 10+ net IRR, and 50% of the best performing VC funds that we have in our portfolio, in EIS portfolio, are life sciences funds. And they only represent, as I said in the beginning, 25% of our VC activities. So it's just to translate or to exemplify how strong those funds are and can generate very high returns. And the performance is mainly driven by the need for pharmaceutical companies to keep on innovating into this space and to refurbish the pipeline of the offering pipeline. They are paying, so the M&A market is going very strong. Pharmaceutical companies are paying higher and higher premiums, and they are forced somehow to acquire earlier, also to remain competitive, because there is a fierce competition ongoing among the pharmaceutical companies. And they know that in order to innovate, they have to go through an open innovation strategy. And the role of VCs to drive innovation in the life science space is paramount. 60% of new drugs which are approved by the FDA are VC-backed. And we've seen that the R&D expenditures of pharmaceutical companies have remained steady since the 50s, but the number of new drugs which they generate is actually plummeting since then. So that's why they're going for open innovation strategy. And on the market gaps of the European life sciences, the first thing is that this industry is structurally undercapitalized. And as Claire introduced, that there is a perception, a market perception for private investors, that this industry is very risky. It's very difficult to assess for non-specialized LPs the risk and to fully grasp the market opportunity there. Also, they are often discouraged by the long holding period. So there is a undercapitalization of this market. Also, the barriers for first-time teams in order to raise a fund is much higher than what we could see in the ICT space, for example. And this is part of it is also because it's very difficult to find teams which combine all the skill sets which are needed in order to successfully invest in this space. So be it, on one hand, the scientific knowledge to be able to assess the potential of the investment, but also then all the financial and the VC experience that you need to have in order to then accompany those companies and also build a successful portfolio. And you need to be also very well connected to the whole VC communities in order to build syndication rounds. The third point are the geographical disparities. There are some countries where life science innovation, despite a lot of innovation potential, are completely untapped. And I'm talking mainly about Central Europe, about Eastern Europe, Southern Europe, and also the Nordics. Where the most concentration of VC activities in Europe is especially in the Netherlands, in Belgium, in France. But on the other countries, there are a lot of work to be done. And there are some segments, market segments, which are even more underserved, especially at the very early stage, tech transfer, and at the late stage. And I will develop a little bit further on these two later on. But this results in a number of issues, which I've listed here on this slide. So first of all, it results into a very fragmented funding process for life sciences entrepreneurs. The need to raise capital among different syndicates at the different stages of the company development. It results also in no capital available for European biotech companies to scale, and a lot of upside left also to foreign investors, especially US investors and also Chinese investors who are more and more investing in Europe. It also results into premature IPOs, which is no longer used, as we can see in the ICT space, as an exit route for VC funds, but rather as a way to attract capital because of lack of private capital available, which translates in then some assets being listed and with no on completely illiquid markets. It also translates in a very narrow pool of VC funds and so of partners for biotech entrepreneurs, and an insufficient translation of research into commercial products, and completely untapped innovation potential, and notably in what we call peripheral Europe. Can move to the next slide. So our approach is actually threefold. So the first thing is that we multiply resources, and I will give concrete examples in my next slide. So we are designing products or mandates in order to channel more capital to VC funds and ultimately to innovative companies, including in the life science space. The second point is that we target funding gaps. So our role is not to crowd out private investors. Our role is to fill the gap where it is needed, and any mandate, any product that we design together with our mandators or our stakeholders starts from a market need, the identification of a market need, from us talking to the market and understanding where are the gaps and how we can maximize our impact. And thirdly, we nurture ecosystems. So we act as cornerstone investors where needed. We provide structuring inputs to our fund managers. We help emerging teams to design their strategy. We act as a sparring partner to help them. And the objective is to help funds and make sure that they have all the ingredients, all the right governance, and build in the end a long-standing and strong ecosystem in the long term. So this is an example of how we've been channeling more capital to the benefit of notably life sciences companies. So this is the Asset Management Umbrella Fund. This is a mandate we launched in 2018. And the goal, so the objective behind was actually to raise capital from institutional investors that normally do not invest at all into the VC or the private equity space, and to give them access to the best performing fund managers in Europe. And the objective of that was, of course, to channel more capital, but also in a view of building this long-standing capital and attract new potential LPs to the ecosystem. Our long-term view is that one day we would like to be redundant in this setup, and we would like to make sure that those institutional investors one day could eventually launch their own VC or private equity investment activity. And here we're talking about pension funds and some banks and also insurance companies. And so we have 5 different compartments, and one of them is a life science one, which for which we have raised 97 million euros, and we have supported 10 funds, 10 of the best performing funds in Europe. And next one is another very recent initiative that we've just actually launched. It's called the Venture Capital Center of Excellence platform, and it's a joint initiative between EIF and EIC Health, which we've been structuring for the past 2 years. And we have here, we're very happy to have the European Union, the European Commission as an anchor investor for up to 150 million euros, including 75 million at first closing, the rest being conditional or contingent upon of our fundraising success. But the objective of the VCOE platform is so first of all, again, to channel more capital to life sciences companies, but also to enhance the collaboration between the key stakeholders of the ecosystem, which in our view, and especially in certain geographies, are not sufficiently collaborating. So here the idea is that so the European Commission, EIF, and some strategic investors, and we're talking about corporates, about health insurance companies, would be investing into this platform. And EIF will then constitute a portfolio of 15 to 20 European life science VC funds that will invest in biotech, in digital health, and in medtech and diagnostic companies. And here, together with EIC Health, we will co-manage this network. And the objective is to provide networking opportunities to those strategic investors, the VCs, and eventually also the companies through different channels, so including networking events that we will, and also there is an AI platform, so that they would have a forum to exchange and to at various levels, including potential co-investment opportunities. The objective is not to provide access to, let's say, the life science venture capital funds, which have been on the market for 20 years and which probably have already their own networks very well established of corporates. But here, what's interesting is that the idea is to provide access to what we call the rising markets, innovation in the rising markets. So all these countries where there are not many investors and so yet, and that typically where innovation completely falls under the radar of those corporates or of the most established VCs. So here it's really about connecting the emerging and the new teams with the strategic investors. And for the corporates, the strategic investors, it gives them a window on innovation opportunities, which again were falling completely under the radar. But also the benefit for those emerging VCs is that they are boosting their networking opportunities, be it on the corporate side, but also of other potential VCs which are active in the same space. And this would have taken probably several years to them to establish without being part of this, without this initiative. So it has really benefit for all the stakeholders in this initiative. And
just say you have just a couple of minutes left now, Sandra.
Okay, so the Pan-European Guarantees Fund, this is a kind of rescue plan that we put in place with several member states of the European Union as a response to the COVID-19 crisis. And here we are actually helping funds to get to the target size We are also providing let's say pop-ups to funds which are no longer fundraising to help their companies which have suffered from the crisis, and also, where possible, replacing defaulting LPs that can no longer honor their drawdown requests because of their suffering from the crisis. And just to conclude, what is needed? So the European life science ecosystem has all the ingredients to succeed and to compete at the global level. So we said the quality of science is there, and I like to compare the life science venture capital the European life science venture capital market to a Formula One car. We have a great car with a great engine, with the best engineers possible, but we are competing. We don't have enough fuel to win the race. If we compare with the US and with China, we need much more money. We need more money to bridge promising research to the market, and here we are already losing. If we don't react and invest more, we will not be able to maximize our innovation potential. We publish as much as the USA in scientific in terms of scientific publication, but the US are originating 3 times as many patents, and China 9 times as many patents. So we absolutely need to provide money and to help the establishment of CT funds, which are able to tech transfer funds, which are able to help in this respect. We also need more capital in order to support the emergence of sizable funds in Europe. The average life science VC fund in Europe is 200 million. In the US is 500 million and plus. Our largest life science European fund is 550 million euros. The largest US life science VC fund is 4.6 billion. We are not sufficiently equipped in order to be competitive at a global level. We absolutely need more funds which are able to provide the large tickets to scale the European champion and avoid that those are European companies have no other choice than turning to the US or China and leave as such Europe in order to scale. So it is paramount that we react and that we invest more now, especially as we've been taking the risk. We are investing at the early stage and we're leaving all these upsides to foreign investors. And finally, we need more capital to grow the pool of specialized investors across Europe. Thank you.
No, thank you very much indeed, Sandra, for an incredibly comprehensive tour through the financial instruments that you have. And you could have easily taken twice as long to describe those. It was really excellent. Thank you. So we have raced through any question time we had available for Sandra, so we will skip straight to Armando. But thank you very much indeed. So Armando, can you introduce yourself and get started?
Yes, thank you very much, Claire. I work at the European Commission in the Directorate-General dealing with growth policies, in particular on SME access to finance policies. So we have a generalist approach, and we focus on any type of SMEs, not necessarily companies in the biotech sector. So I will provide a fair presentation generally what is available from the Commission side on the financial instruments. That is basically the type of finance that is intermediated through local intermediaries, and they are often managed by the European Investment Fund, where my colleague Sandra has been presenting about excellent initiatives, and I will try and complement what has been said, having an overview which is more general on what is available for any kind of SMEs, with a particular focus on biotech companies as well, of course. Shall I go on or with the presentation?
Yes, I think Kai will change the slides for you, so just ask for the next slide when you are ready.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So basically, I wanted to start this presentation with an overview of the situation. We have, of course, a special look on the COVID-related situation that SMEs in Europe are facing. We have just launched and received the results of a survey that we do every year, and they were published a few weeks ago, where the importance of the financing issues for SMEs in Europe has been evidenced and is quite relevant. If we go to the next slide, we can see that we can go even the next one. That access to finance is the blue line, which was when the question is what is the most important issues for you, for SMEs in general. You can see that access to finance for the latest years was a line that was going down, but actually in the last year it has gone up again. Why? Because of course the liquidity issues are very relevant for any kind of SMEs, including of course for the biotech companies, and I am sure that we will be out of this crisis soon, but in the meantime we are trying to face these issues, and I will try to tell something about what is the European response to that. If you go to the next slide, we can see what are the main issues that companies are facing in Europe. We are seeing that the willingness of banks to provide financing is decreasing on year on year. We can see that one of the most relevant aspects that we see in this year's results is that the willingness of partners to provide services financing to companies is reduced to zero. So we can see that the net replies of companies that they don't see during the year much improvement in willingness to find partners for the companies. This is a questionnaire that it was asked to companies, mainly SMEs across all sectors. And also the willingness to invest has been going down, such as the general economic outlook that has been decreasing severely, as you can see in the bottom chart. But one aspect is important, the availability of public financing support. As we all know that member states and also at European level have been channeling important contribution through their public sector financing to the economic sector and to SMEs in particular. And I can maybe develop a bit more on what is available and what in particular. We can go to the next slide, where you can see the structure of the European market. The European financing market is mainly, as we all know, a bank-based market where banks provide the majority of financing for SMEs, while equity is only a smaller portion, as you can see at the bottom of this graph. This is relevant because when addressing the various issues, we are trying, of course, to fix the banking system as it has been done in the last 10 years, but also try to develop capital markets that, especially companies for the biotech sector, is very relevant. Venture capital, IPOs, these are all non-banking forms of financing that for European companies are very relevant, although not very much used, as this chart explains. But actually, it is important to diversify sources of financing, especially for companies like those in the biotech sector, where equity, especially in the startup phases, are very relevant. So we are also developing, and I will tell you more about these products, like for venture capital, like on top of what Sandra has been mentioning, that are indeed complementary, and we have been developing very good collaboration with European Investment Fund to deploy these instruments. Last slide about the trend in banking application. This is an interesting one. More companies have been resorting to their banks during the crisis. We can see how the bar has grown up while the previous years it showed like a declining trend. But actually, it's also relevant how the rejections have increased in the other chart on the right. This means that more companies have been resorting to banks, also thanks to the guarantee schemes and the various measures put forward by the member states. But of course, also the outcomes of the application have been decreasing. Less people manage to get the whole funding that they have been asking to their banks. If you go to the next slide, we can see as a short summary of what the crisis has brought. So the economy is expected to contract sharply this year, and the impact is uneven on different sectors and across member states. There was although the COVID was an asymmetric shock because it has covered all the countries' populations in an equal way. It's also relevant to say that in different sectors the impact was different. We can mention the travel sector, of course, the services sectors where physical presence is needed, and this has been impacted severely. And also there is a big dependence of the industry on essential goods and services, while there was a loss of income for business that is quite relevant. If we go to the next slide, we can see what is the EU response. This was only the a state of play of the situation. So I would like to just spend a few minutes on what is the availability of at EU level to answer the situation. This is a recovery package that I think all of you know. Immediately after the crisis, the Commission has put forward a package of aid that include the so-called SURE financial scheme for unemployment, also the European Stability Mechanism Pandemic Crisis Support, as well as EIB, European Investment Bank, has been put forward a guarantee fund that is providing support, including for equity to to companies in Europe. This comes together with the Next Generation EU that all of you know, that is this massive aid support that is being finalized in these days, which will manage to raise financing through capital market to help member states with extra financing to help their economies recover from the crisis. And then, of course, the multi-annual financial framework, which is this more than 1 trillion euros package for 7 years that together with the Next Generation EU is going to be finalized in these days and will be launched as from next year. This comes together with two, I would say, regulatory, more it's not really financing, but is more leeway for member states to exceed their limits, spending limits that were provided under the Stability and Growth Pact, and also a waiver to the state aid rules, where a temporary framework was allowed for member states to further help their companies. So the compliance to state aid measures has been somehow waived, so that member states can help more their companies beyond what is regularly provided and regulated under the state aid rules at European level. If you go to the next slide, we go more in depth into the MFF. We are now at the end of this period for 2014-2020, where a number of financial instruments are available for SMEs, including in the biotech sector. We can see here instruments for the social change and innovation, for the instruments called COSME that I will detail later, Creative Europe, Innofin Horizon 2020 that I think my colleague Luis will detail later, and others. These are instruments that where the program is ending at the end of this year, but this will continue to produce results even later, because actually the end of 2020 is only the end of the period where we can contract intermediaries, for instance, under COSME or under Innofin. But this doesn't mean that when an intermediary signs a contract with the Commission EIF by the end of this year, they can still continue to produce loans or equities, so channel financing to SMEs even for the next years. So these are programs that are still in the current MFF, so not in the new one that will start in 2021. But it's relevant, and I wanted to focus more on COSME because that will be the, I would say, the parents program of the next one called InvestEU that will start as from next year. If we go to the next slide, we go to the next year ones. But before going there, if you come back to the previous one, sorry about that. I wanted to stay on this one to define what is about the COSME program. Basically, this is a program that is available for any kind of companies, so including companies in the biotech sector, and we have indeed financed some VC funds in this sector under the equity facility. Actually, COSME is indeed composed of two facilities. One is a loan guarantee program, which provides guarantees for loans to intermediaries, mainly banks, and is mainly for loans that are small, so less than 150,000 euros. But we also, together with Innofin, contract with the help of the European Investment Fund that does the selection and management of the intermediaries on our behalf. Basically, we select intermediaries under the equity facility as well, which is basically venture capital funds. Venture capital funds that basically get a quota of their capital from the European Commission through the EIF, and then channel financing through equity financing to companies in the various stages of their development. And we see from the results that many companies in the biotech sector have been financed through our COSME and Innofin equity instruments under the so-called single equity facility. I wanted to say some words about this because actually these schemes will be continued in the future framework, and that's why I wanted to go to the next slide. Because in the future framework, rather than an overall list of different instruments that are available now, will condense and will synergize all of them into a single fund called InvestEU. InvestEU will be a single fund which will bring together all the different EU financial instruments that we've seen in the previous slides, and basically will be composed of several windows. One of that is the SME window. SME window, which is I think here the light blue one, is basically the ones that will continue the financial instruments available under COSME, because it will have in it a loan product and an equity product. And under the loan product, we will channel, of course, loan guarantees for companies. So under the equity product, there will be a number of products that will be available. So not only venture capital, but also specific programs such as, for instance, an IPO fund, which will try and financing the IPO phase of for our companies. This is will be launched as from the beginning of next year, and it will be composed not only, of course, of the InvestEU itself as a fund, but also of two components, which is the advisory hub, which is basically a sort of advisory consulting service where companies in the need of funding could find specialized support to help on how to get funding, and also the InvestEU portal, which is basically a matchmaking portal where companies can find their investors and vice versa to match demand and supply of financing at European level. If we go to the next slide, we reply then to what is available under the SME window. So it will be financing for any kind of companies, from startups, younger and smaller companies, SMEs lacking sufficient collateral, with and promoting the implementation of union policies across different areas such as innovation, digitalization. So it's an horizontal approach where, of course, biotech companies play an important role, because we all know how decisive they are for our life and our economy. So they will be beneficiaries of the different products that will be included under the SME window. If we go to the next slide, then the question is how this will be managed and implemented. Here it's a practical graph where it explains how this will be done. So basically, it's the Commission that will, with the help of implementing partners, in this case is the European Investment Fund, but InvestEU will be open also to member states, because there will be member states compartment. It's not a direct funding. So basically, it's not that companies have to come to the Commission or the EIF to ask for funding, but on our behalf, the EIF and national promotional banks, in the case of member states compartments, can contract financial intermediaries at the local level, and then the companies should go to the financial intermediaries at local level to ask for financing, be it a loan or be it an equity financing. The next question, and that is addressed in this slide, is how a company could know what are the local intermediaries that are available for them. We have a practical portal. It's called access2finance.eu, which lists if I am an entrepreneur and I want to find what is the local intermediary that is available for me, I just click on a country, and if we go to the next slide, a list of intermediaries with the telephone numbers and the contact details and the type of financing they provide is available. So the company, the entrepreneur, can simply call submit the business plan to the company, to the intermediary, and then ask for the type of financing that is needed. Just one final word in the next slide on an overall project that is called Capital Markets Union. This is not a financing program that the Commission is putting forward, but is more a program that is aimed at removing obstacles for access to finance for SMEs, but also other objectives. Basically, I found it quite important for companies in the biotech sector where equity capital is very important. This is a project is composed of several regulatory and non-regulatory initiatives that try to address the bottlenecks that companies have to address to access non-banking forms of financing. And I can mention, for instance, crowdfunding. There was a legislation that was put forward. Public markets. I can mention the SME growth markets, or the improvements of the prospectus rules for companies who list on public markets, but also some passports for venture capital funds that can raise financing more easily across EU. And this program was started in 2015 and will continue. A new release of the action plan was done only a few months ago. So this is a major initiative from the EU that is aimed to unlock more more complementary alternative sources of finance for companies. And I think that companies in the biotech tech sector will be bigger beneficiaries of this better regulatory environment for them. With this, I try to be in more or less in the time in order to allow for more space for the others and for questions. So, but if you have any immediate questions, I'm ready to reply. Otherwise, I think we have a slot later for a Q&A only session.
Thanks very much indeed, Armando. And again, you squeezed a huge amount of information for some really encouraging programs into a very modest 20 minutes. We have a couple of questions, but I would like to save them to the end because they could both probably do with longer answers than we have available to us right now. So I'll say thank you very much again, and then we'll move across to the slides of our last speaker, Luis Sanchez from DG RTD. So Luis, do you want to introduce yourself and make your presentation?
Yes, sure. So thank you very much, first of all, for inviting us to this very interesting session. I work for the EIC at DG RTD, Research and Innovation. Well, I'm going to try to explain what the EIC, the European Innovation Council, offers as support to biotech companies and more generally to very innovative companies. So next. So I don't think I need to insist in what is the problem that we have in the origin. I think my colleagues already explained very well, but for us it's particularly the issue of the lack of breakthrough and disruptive innovations that create new markets. So as Sandra said, we are very competitive publishing in research, but we are not so much when it comes to traduce and to translate into the market these innovations, these discoveries. Next. So again, this is a graph that tries to illustrate these differences with other markets, with particularly with the United States, and I have another one, I think, with China. Next, please. So we see the differences between the unicorns, the VC funding available for the companies, the number of operations, the size of the operation. So I think the problem is clearly identified. And next, please. What I'm going to try to explain now is what is the solution, or what is the contribution from the Horizon Europe, from the Research and Innovation Framework Program, that is the responsibility of DG RTD. So this is the general scheme. So there are plenty of opportunities for biotech companies in 3 different pillars. The first one is more as fundamental research, is the European Research Council and other initiatives. The second one is more collaborative, industrial, challenge-driven collaborative projects that were also mentioned at the beginning. And the third pillar is the open innovation. And I think here is when we have main novelties or relevant novelties, and one of that is the European Innovation Council. Next. So if we zoom in this pillar, we can see 3 initiatives: the European Innovation Council, the European Innovation Ecosystems, and the EIT. I'm going to focus on the EIC. The numbers and the budget you can see there are the numbers that were proposed by the Commission. As Armando said, the MFF is still under negotiation, so there may be slight variations as to these numbers that I will offer across my presentation. Next. So what is the European Innovation Council? What we try to do here is to accelerate the time to market for breakthrough innovations in a simple, agile way and open to all areas of innovation. So next, please. This is to try to summarize and to serve as a, how to say, as a roadmap or map for people that probably were familiarized with the SME instrument, with the EIC Pilot, so maybe many different names from our organization. But what we can see here is the evolution. When we started in 2014 with the SME instrument, it was like SBIR, the American SBIR in Europe. It was for the first time we were providing substantial support to individual SMEs. In 2017, we put together a number of other programs, particularly the FED Open and FTI, to try also to cover more parts of the innovation value chain. And the last major change happened last year when we introduced for the first time the blended finance. So joining grant and equity, and also other programs like FED Proactive, we started to work with program managers also to try to change a little bit the way we manage the projects. So we are at the end of this EIC pilot, and next year we will start with the EIC fully fledged. Well, this EIC work program is still being discussed with the member states, so I cannot anticipate details. So what I'm going to explain is the EIC pilot, main results. There will not be major differences. Of course, we will try to improve a number of aspects of the project, but I think what I will be explaining today can be very useful to understand the philosophy, the main schemes we are going to put in place and we are going to reinforce for the next 7 years. Next. So here you can see that the EIC provides support along the innovation cycle from very innovative ideas to a scale up. I will refer mainly today to the last part, the accelerator, but I will provide you some slides that also will be available for the audience if you want to know more about the Pathfinder and transition to innovation activities. But what you can see here is that we provide different kinds of support depending on the innovation stage of the project. So we provide from the very single idea, very innovative idea, more collaborative oriented support in consortia, 3 to 4 million euros, 3 partners minimum, long projects, 3-4 years. This is the typical Pathfinder project. We have also created like a bridge between the Pathfinder, this more collaborative, we are talking about TRL, technology readiness level from 1 to 4. So the transition to innovation and activities try to pick up most promising results from the Pathfinder and help them and to put in the format of a business to move into the accelerator. Next. So very general numbers from 2014 to 2015. So one of the things that I have to mention here is that the program is very, very competitive. You can see that the average success rate is 5.5. We have invested 4 billion euros so far. We have supported 6,000 projects, and you can see the different success rates for the different programs. You can see that the SME instrument that I will explain now more in detail is the most competitive. Next. So I will not spend so much time with the Pathfinder. I already explained that it's still projects that still require some fundamental research. It's collaborative. It may involve research institutions, universities, but also SMEs and larger companies. Next. Typical project is 3.4 million euros of EU contribution, 6 partners on average, and around 3 years and a half. So this is typically the Pathfinder project that I suppose will be very similar in the future. Next. The accelerator instead supports only individual SMEs. What we are looking for here are for breakthrough innovation that creates new markets. We are trying to take up the high risk that others cannot. So again, it's another attempt to try to fill the gap. And especially for these companies that show a high growth potential and high market potential. We are looking as any other investor, I would say, for great management teams with the ambition to scale up and with a demonstrated knowledge of the target market. So, and of course, non-bankable, which non-bankable is probably not a good term, but what we want to say here is that our projects that are not able to raise sufficient funding to move forward the project and to attract other private funding. Next. What do we offer? So we offer a blended a blended formula, I would say, with the grant component up to 2.5 million euros, which covers 70% of the total project cost. This grant, due to the competition rules, covers TRLs from 5, 6 to 8. And the novelty since October 2019 is the addition of an equity investment or investment in general of up to 15 million euros. So this blended finance, next please, is aimed to be simple, and I think this is an important point also for you to consider. It's open to all areas of innovation. So the EIC is mainly bottom up. There are no prescriptive topics. It's open to all kind of innovations. It's flexible, and there are no geographical criteria. It doesn't mean that from time to time we may call for proposals that address EU priority, as we did, for example, in May, to reinforce the accomplishment of the Green Deal goals, for example, or in March to address the COVID crisis. But more generally, we will be bottom up. Next. The call for proposals is continuously open. We try to give you a quick response in terms of time to inform and time to grant. It takes a bit more time, the time for the investment. I will explain why in the next slides. Next. And we would like this to be very much innovator-centric. So it is a new scheme that wants to be tailor-made support for the SMEs and the startups. And we don't offer only money. We would like to be recognized by offering business smart money. So in addition to the money, we provide mentoring, coaching, expertise, advice, access to corporates, access to finance, access to other markets, overseas fairs. So there is a pool of services that are also available to the beneficiaries of the money. Next. How do we select? So first, I would like to say that this is going to change a little bit. The general process will not be essentially different, but not exactly how it is written here. But basically, we will have an open call, as I said, continuously open. You will have to submit your proposal. There will be an evaluation by external experts, typically people that have expertise in research, in technology, but also in financing, investments. We rank the proposals, and the best proposals are invited to an interview. In the past, it was in Brussels. Now it's in WebEx, as you can imagine. And then for the companies retained, we have first the grant agreement that typically happens in the next 3-4 months after the companies communicated they were retained. And then we start with the due diligence process for the investment. Next. How does the equity investment work? So the Commission has created the EIC fund. It's a VC fund. It's the first time that the Commission will invest directly into the company, so is becoming a shareholder of the companies. We did that investment that I mentioned before, up to 15 million euros. This investment may take different forms, and shares, convertibles, other equity types, or investment types. One of the characteristics is that we don't want to be an intrusive equity, so what we want is to support the company and to support the management team to make an impact. Return on investment is not the main or the only KPI of the fund. The EIB group is the fund advisor. Next. And in our investment strategy, as I said, we are looking for impact rather than maximizing the return of the investment. It's a patient capital. I think companies that are attending today this workshop will understand very well, because typically in this sector, in this domain, there is a long average perspective on return on the investment, 17 years, with a maximum for this fund of 15 years. The exit strategy is not predefined, so it will depends on a case-by-case basis, but may include all the typical ways that you may be familiar with. Next. One of the things that I would like to stress today is the importance for the fund of the syndication with other co-investors. I think the expression crowding in, crowding out has been mentioned before. Of course, we are all on the same page. This is to fill the gap. So this is not to compete with the market, not to replace other players. What we want is to crowd in, to attract other investors, and we take this very seriously since the beginning, and we try to syndicate our support as soon as possible. In any case, it is the company who has the last say, and the fund is always more than willing to be replaced by external investors if at some point the grant or part of the equity made the risk the operation and attract those investors. Next. So the due diligence takes time, depends on the case. It's performed by the EIC fund with the support of the EIB group. The goal here is to define a tailor-made investment, so to structure the operation, and it's focused on many aspects. And it depends very much on the company, the geography, the project. So it's something that is again obviously tailor-made. Next. Well, some numbers to have an idea about the dimension. We had in 4 cutoffs. We call cutoffs, so the call is always open, but every other 3 months we stop. We take all the applications that we receive, and we launch the selection process that I explained before. In total, since October 2019, we had almost 10,000 proposals. I'm not taking into consideration the last cutoff in October. This is still under evaluation. So this is on average 2,000 proposals per cutoff. The success rate for this period is even smaller than the one I mentioned before the equity. So it's 3% success rate. So you can understand that there is strong demand, and the quality of the proposals is really, really high quality. 25% pass the thresholds. We, in those cases, we give a seal of excellence. So, well, I'm not going to enter into the explanation of that, but it's a kind of recognition, but also has some benefits at national level to try to fund the project that was excellent, but not, but the budget was not sufficient to fund all the proposals we have. Next. Number of projects you can see, and this is important for you to see that biotech, life sciences related projects are the bulk of the portfolio. So you can see health there, you can see biotechnology, but also food, agri, so many projects related to bio. Next. This is the contribution from the European Union. So previous slide was number of projects. This is money. Again, you can see that health is almost one third, and you can see in blue and orange the proportion, the distribution between grant and investment. So on average, I can say that typical EIC project blended finance is around 2 million grant, around 3 million, 4 million equity. On average, of course, there are projects with 1 million equity and projects with 50 million. That's the average. Next. And finally, you can see the number of proposals by country. So France, Germany, Switzerland, Spain. So you can have an idea. Of course, we are very committed to try to raise and to encourage proposals from widening countries, and we will provide dedicated support for those countries in the next framework program. Next. Okay. Many thanks.
No, thank you very much indeed, Luis. And I'm a big fan of what was the SME instrument and is now the EIC. It's been a fantastic opportunity for individual companies to apply for funding that simply wouldn't be eligible under more collaborative programs and manage that very closely themselves. The statistics on success rates are a harsh reminder of how difficult this money is to get in general. So it is quite hard for small companies to do that. But I'm going to jump straight to some of the questions that we had. But I would like to thank all of our presenters for very strong presentations. And I think we will all take the time to go through their slides again very carefully, because there's a lot of information in there for everybody. We had our first question up, which of course brings the dreaded Brexit topic to the table, and this is an interesting one from our SME platform chair, Peter Heinrich. It's saying that the UK was an excellent source of innovation, and how will you compensate for this innovation loss post-Brexit? And perhaps what also will happen to the EIF equity stake in UK-based VCs? So that certainly brings a strong personal element that myself. I'm interested to know myself how many UK-based innovations will actually chase the money rather than be lost to the system. So I think we might see quite a lot of UK-initiated startups migrating to the EU, but they're also just as likely to migrate to the US now, I think. So it'll be interesting to see where that innovation moves. But perhaps we could go back to Sandra in terms of the EIF and ask the question about what will happen to the EIF equity stake in UK-based VCs.
Of course, no, thank you very much for the question. So when we are already, of course, committed already in those UK funds, we remain a very active LP, of course. So here there is no change to that. But now, when we are looking at new investments, our geographical restrictions are that we can support funds which have an allocation to companies based or active in the EU 27 countries, EFTA countries, and also candidates for the EU accession countries, of 2/3 of their total commitments. So that's the rule, which leaves a bit of flexibility for fund managers to invest also in the UK or in the US, especially for life sciences funds, for which it is important, and I'm notably talking about the established ones, which typically have a global focus, and it's important also for let's say, to have an overview of what's going on in the various targeted space at a global level, and not only look at what is ongoing in Europe. So there is a bit of flexibility, but it's not as much as we had in the past, of course. So here, the only flexibility that we have is through the asset management umbrella funds, which are, as I presented earlier, because it is invested by purely private investors that are looking here for financial returns. We have some geographical restrictions, but which apply at portfolio level. So at the mandate portfolio level, so not at the individual investments. So if we could support managers which are more heavily focused on the UK, but this means that we need to compensate and have in the portfolio, for example, several funds that would be purely dedicated to EU 20 or to eligible countries. And this is what we hope, let's say, a transitionary period. I think the hope for everyone is that indeed an agreement is found between the UK government and the European Union also to the same way we have the EFTA countries where we have some commercial agreement that we could strike a similar setup also to collaborate further with the UK.
Okay, no, that's excellent. Thank you. And I was glad that you brought in the status of the corporate investors as well to that, because obviously this is money from more than one place. Armando and Luis, did you want to also comment on this? Because you both presented things with an element of sort of private investors as well.
Well, from my side, the issue of Brexit is quite relevant. Has been addressed from various angles of the Commission. I was particularly following the one from the Capital Markets Union point of view, where, of course, the fact that Brexit and London in particular is a major capital for capital markets in Europe. Of course, there was a need for somehow to compensate and to tackle the loss of this major financial center for European companies as well. So while of course UK will remain a major partner, I think the Capital Markets Union project aims at indeed trying to develop also the other financial services in Europe as major, and the various passports, for instance, that have been put forward. I'm thinking, for instance, FMD or MiFID, that are major ways how financial services could be somehow expanded cross-border in various EU member states, are good examples of how the cross-border transfer of capital is working, and but this is a major point that has been raised. So I'm happy to take any further views if needed.
Thanks very much. Luis, did you want to add anything into that? No, simply I cannot agree more with my colleagues, and the only thing I can say is that, the EIC is called to play a role on that as well. So it's another reason to have an EIC in Europe.
No, thank you very much indeed. We had an additional question around the clarification on defining an SME. Is this just the usual SME definition that has been going for a long time in Europe?
Yes, this is the SME definition is one referred to basically is coming from a recommendation of 2003, where basically an SME is defined with precise indicators, particularly in terms of turnover, balance sheet, and number of employees. In practice, an SME is a company that either has a balance sheet of less than 43 million or a turnover of less than 50 million euros, and a number of employees which is less than 250. So if a company is of less than 250 employees and has a balance sheet which is lower than the figures that I just provided, is considered an SMEs for various policies of the Commission. I'm thinking, for instance, state aid, the SME instrument that Luis was mentioning before. So various policies that are related to Commission initiatives refer to SMEs as these thresholds that I have been defining.
No, thank you very much. And I think a sort of supplementary question to that would be, with this sort of equity investments now developing further in the EU, would that affect the part of the SME definition that refers to percent of the company not owned by a non-SME?
Basically, the linked enterprise issue is encompassed in the SME definition. So basically, within the various criteria that are defined under the SME definition is how a company is owned. And for instance, in the case of if the company is owned by certain entities, there are some thresholds that have to be taken into account. For instance, if a company is owned by venture capital who has there are some thresholds of share that should be taken into account. If it's a public investment, a public entity, others. So it's really if you go into the SME definition guide online, you can see the different thresholds that are applied in case of a company, an SMEs, which is not independent but is linked to another entity, such as another company or a VC fund or other public entities, for instance.
No, that's great. Thanks very much. We have a quick practical question on whether the cut-off dates for 2021 for the Accelerator are already in place or not, and if yes, what are they?
Not yet, because as I said, well, we are still a little bit depending on the final closing of the budget negotiations. What I can say for people to stay tuned and to have some kind of realistic expectations is that the calls, the cutoffs for the next year, of course, there will be the first one. I think it will be around May, June.
Yeah, but I'm presuming it's following similar proposal requirements to the ones that we saw this year, which means there's a lot of preparatory work that can be done anyway, rather than starting when you see the call for proposals.
Yeah, basically yes, but will change. So, well, I cannot anticipate now, but we want to simplify. So there will be some preparatory work, particularly for, let's say, proposals like in the previous period, but we will put in place a system probably with 2 phases to try to simplify, and we will provide support to the companies in that process as well. So I cannot say more now, but there will be some simplification.
Oh, no, that's great. We'll definitely have you guys back when the program opens up again, because I know that in sort of reviewing a lot of these proposals over the last few years, I think a lot of companies have struggled to switch from the grant-facing mentality of a proposal into something that is much more business-oriented, where the actual sort of the science is a small percentage of the marks, and what is the majority of the marks starts from the business progression, and that's always been a challenge for small companies, and it's an ongoing process.
We are completely aware, so this is the reason why I say that the Commission has decided to provide some support also to the companies, because most of the companies we support under the EIC are micro SMEs, I mean startups, companies with less than 5 years life, and many times 10 people in the team. So we understand that those companies need support, and the EIC will provide that support also for the application.
Excellent, and I'm hopefully that all the national contact points will be able to support that kind of learning required as well. But EuropaBio will certainly help through our SME platform next year. If I can go back now to a few of our questions that we received during the registration times, and several of them can be merged together because a couple of them asked about specific sectors such as women's health, but you don't have topic-specific calls, rather just general mechanisms into which that would fit anyway. But there's a question around non-dilutive early-stage funding. And so could you just clarify again the sort of the non-dilutive earliest stage funding that's available from the different programs? I think, I don't know who would be best to start that. Probably not Sandra, as you are later stage funding. Lewis, perhaps?
Well, yeah, of course, the EIC provides grants starting around TRL 5 and we will have then the option that was not in Horizon 2020, but will be under Horizon, access the equity later on. So at the beginning, there will be the grant, fully non-dilutive, it's clear. And in any case, the EIC fund is founder-friendly. We always try not to dilute the owners. So we have different solutions for that before trying to attract other investors.
Thanks very much, Armando. Was there anything you wanted to add into that?
I think that Luis summarized very well the main program that indeed provides very interesting funding for SMEs and even beyond. So it's I will not have much to add. I think that's enough.
Okay, no, I think it'll be great for us to look at them in more detail when we can see them next year and look at the practical aspects of each program. We did have another question submitted asking whether Latin American biotech companies could take part in these funds as part of consortia. So I'm not really sure how you would address non-EU or originally sort of usually non-eligible organizations being part of funding programs.
For the current program, non-EU countries, some programs are available for non-EU countries. I'm thinking about Horizon. I'm thinking about COSME, where it works through the so-called partnership principle. So countries which are outside the EU, for instance, neighbor countries, pre-accession countries, Mediterranean countries, can chip in and participate into the various components of COSME. And this is a way how it works. For US, there are, I think, specific other initiatives, but for these financial instruments that we have been discussing during the presentation, this is more aimed at EU 27 and, as I mentioned, also partner countries in the pre-accession, like Mediterranean partnership countries, and this is more or less the general the principle of this. But this doesn't mean that for partnership in the context of other programs that the Commission in the US, it's not excluded that companies from the US can participate as well.
Okay, thanks very much. And I guess that's getting down again to the practical aspects of each program as to how different origin companies can take part in it. But I think that brings us close to the end of our session this afternoon, and I wanted to sort of wrap up with one of the comments that I just came through recently, which echoed something I wanted to say anyway, in that it was really great to see the focus on obviously not market distortion and crowding out, but enabling also the venture capital funds within Europe themselves to mature and become more ambitious, because it makes lending easier to do, and thus they will be able to secure their own investment funds more easily. So it's obviously it's not just about building the biotech landscape within Europe, but about building a more sustainable set of investment tools within the private sector. Because what we really need to see in the long term is much more private sector investment, so that the funds can scale up to closer to US numbers, which we're still very far behind. And a comment from David follows along those lines, really, in that you're doing a really great job of building an environment, a networking communication environment around the funding that brings more confidence to enable further investment. And that is more like the US scene currently is, where the levels of confidence have traditionally been much higher. So I don't know if any of the speakers wanted to say anything to wrap up. So perhaps, Sandra, did you want to add any final words? I've possibly just thrown Sandra under the bus because she is on mute and I don't know where she is. So we'll pop over to Luis. Sorry, Armando, did you want to say?
No, please, Luis.
Okay, nothing, just but thanking the organization for this invitation. And well, I'm all the team in the EIC are very willing to come back to you as soon as we have more details to explain, because this program is particularly addressed to the audience we have today. So it was a great opportunity, and well, we are eager to support very promising companies and to get the next European unicorns from the biotech sector.
Excellent. We are very delighted to hear that you will come back. So we will certainly come back and knock on the door. So Armando, did you also want to say something that was very similar to that?
I wanted to link to what you have just said on the attractiveness of our funding for the private sector, and actually this is the aim of many programs of the EU, especially in the equity space, where we are just acting as catalysts of private sector co-investments. So our role is just to attract the private money. So we want just to be there and create the conditions for the major institutional investors such as pension funds, insurance schemes, to come back into the equity space and then reduce the public intervention so that the private market can work alone. With this, I just endorse what Luis has said. I also thank you and remain available for any kind of follow-up information that you might need from me.
No, that's super. And I think we wrap up 2020 as a unique year indeed, and I'm very much hoping that what biotech has proven it can do this year is a great facilitator for future private investment. Not only on the healthcare side in terms of incredibly rapid development of diagnostics and vaccines, but also around the Green Deal as well, where shorter-term, high-scale investment in green and sustainable technologies is going to attract many more of the large insurers and the pension funds into that space, because in longer term, it's far more beneficial to them to have these technologies matured. So, Sandra, I come back to you, and I'm so sorry I dropped you quickly under the bus before.
I was hearing you. I could not speak at the time, no, but I thank you very much for this opportunity. I second what my colleagues just said. Indeed, I mean, the public intervention in Europe is still very much needed. And there is a clear momentum at the moment with the pandemic. I think it has been a real eye-opener for everybody. It is our role as public players to fill this gap and try to catalyze the private sector to this industry and showcase, what great features we have on the European market at the moment.
No, that's perfect. So I would just like to close by saying a big thank you to all of our speakers who put a lot of effort and energy into their presentations today. I would also like to thank all of the participants, which is really fantastic to see you all here today. And we will share the recording and the slides with you after this. And obviously, we really will follow this up in our program for our SME platform next year, because happy SMEs are a happy EuropaBio. So we're always very happy with that. And I would like to say finally, behind the scenes, thank you to Kai, who did all the slide work and the initial interaction with all of the speakers. So I wrap up and say thank you very much. You're now free to go and get your next cup of coffee and get back to your real work. And we look forward to seeing you again very soon. Thank you very much.